I noticed something the morning it all started to unravel. Not a big thing, just a sound. My wife was in the kitchen, talking on the phone. Low voice. That specific kind of low voice, not quiet because she was tired, but quiet because she was being careful. I'd heard that voice before, a long time ago, from someone else. My mother, when I was 9, calling someone she wasn't supposed to call. I didn't say anything. I poured my coffee, kissed her on the cheek, and drove to work. That was a Tuesday. My name isn't important. What I do isn't important. What matters is that I was 43 years old, 17 years into a marriage I thought was solid, living in a house I'd paid off early, with a daughter in her second year of college and a wife I'd trusted completely. I say trusted completely, not because I was naive, I wasn't, but because she'd never given me a reason not to, not once in 17 years. Her name was Sandra. Is Sandra. You don't stop being someone just because the marriage ends. We met when we were both 26. She was working at an architecture firm downtown. I was in commercial insurance, building a book of business from nothing. We dated for 2 years, got married, bought a small house, had our daughter Kelsey, moved to a bigger house. Normal. Good normal. The kind of normal that feels boring when you're living it and irreplaceable when it's gone. I worked hard. I won't pretend otherwise. There were stretches, long stretches, where I was at the office by 7 and home after 8. Some weekends I was on the phone dealing with claims or client renewals. Sandra handled the house, handled Kelsey's school stuff, handled most of the social calendar. We had an arrangement, unspoken but understood. I provided. She managed. We were a team, just playing different positions. I thought we were a team. Looking back now, I can identify the moments I missed. A colder reception when I came home late. Fewer questions about my day. More nights where she was already asleep by the time I came to bed. Or said she was. I noticed them. I just filed them under marriage going through a flat patch rather than marriage going through a crack. There's a difference. I got the category wrong. The low voice on the phone that Tuesday was the first thing I couldn't file away. For about 2 weeks, I told myself I was imagining it. Then I stopped telling myself that because she started leaving her phone face down on every surface. Countertop, nightstand, coffee table, always face down. Sandra had never done that. Her phone used to sit screen up next to her coffee mug every single morning while she scrolled through the news. Now it was face down like a card she didn't want me to see. I didn't go through her phone. I want to be clear about that. Not because I'm proud of the restraint, but because it wouldn't have mattered. What I did instead was quieter. My brother-in-law, Sandra's younger brother, Philip, had been coming around a lot that year. He was 38, recently separated from his wife, working in landscape contracting. Philip and I had always gotten along fine. He was easy company, funny in a dry way, handy around the house, good with Kelsey growing up. He'd come over for dinner maybe once a month, sometimes help me with projects in the backyard. Normal family stuff. But that year, he was coming over more. Twice a week sometimes, often when I wasn't home. Sandra would mention it casually. Philip stopped by this afternoon, and I'd say, oh yeah, and she'd say yeah, just for an hour, and that would be the end of it. It should have flagged sooner. I'm still not sure why it didn't. Maybe because it was her brother. You don't look at your wife's brother the same way you'd look at a coworker or a neighbor. You give him the benefit of a category that feels safe. The thing that finally moved me from suspicion to certainty wasn't dramatic. It was a receipt. I was looking for my car insurance card in the glove compartment. Found a gas station receipt I'd never made, date and time on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks earlier when I'd been at work. The card was from a station 2 towns over. Sandra had been to that station before with me. We'd stopped there once on the way back from a weekend trip, but I hadn't been there in 2 years, and the receipt was from last month. I held that piece of paper for about 30 seconds. Then I put it back where I found it and closed the glove compartment. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront her the next night. I called my attorney instead, a man I'd used for business contracts for over a decade, someone I trusted completely, and I asked him to recommend a private investigator. He didn't ask me why. He just gave me a name and a number. The investigator's name was Reeves. He was ex-law enforcement, mid-50s, not much for small talk. I met him at a coffee shop, explained what I suspected, gave him dates and patterns I'd noticed. He listened, took notes, said he'd need 2 to 3 weeks. It took 11 days. He brought me a folder. He placed it on the table between us without saying anything. I opened it. Photographs. Philip's truck in the driveway of our house. Philip and Sandra at a restaurant 40 minutes from our neighborhood, a place they'd clearly chosen for its distance, a hotel parking lot, Philip's truck and Sandra's car side by side. Time stamped. I looked at every photograph. I didn't say anything for a while. How long? I finally asked. Reeves said, based on what he could establish, at least 8 months. Possibly longer. 8 months. Our daughter had been home for part of that. Christmas had happened in the middle of that. I'd taken Sandra to dinner for our anniversary during that. I thanked him, paid him in cash, drove home, and made dinner like it was any other night. Sandra came home at 6:30. We ate together. She told me about a problem at her firm. I listened. I asked questions. I poured her a glass of wine. I was already gone. She just didn't know it yet. My attorney started the paperwork the next morning. He asked me what I wanted. I told him I wanted it clean, fast, and with as little drama as possible. I told him about Philip. He wrote that down. In our state, adultery affects the division of assets. He told me to document everything, change no behavior, say nothing. I said nothing for 3 more weeks. What I did during those 3 weeks was move. Not physically, not yet, but financially. I knew our accounts. I knew where the money was. I didn't hide anything or do anything improper. I simply ensured that what was mine was clearly mine before things got complicated. My attorney advised me. I acted within the law, and I was methodical about it. Then something happened that I hadn't planned for. Sandra's mother called me. Her name was Rosalind. She was 64, widowed, and she'd always been pleasant to me in a formal way. The kind of mother-in-law who was polite at holidays and never interfered. We weren't close, but we were respectful. She called me on a Thursday afternoon on my cell, which she rarely did. She asked her she could meet me for coffee. She said it was important. I said yes. She was already at the table when I arrived. She looked tired. Not like she'd slept badly, but like she'd been carrying something heavy for longer than she should have and it had started the show. She didn't waste time. She told me she knew about Sandra and Philip. She'd known for about 4 months, she said, because Sandra had told her. Not to confess, but because she needed someone to talk to. Rosalind had told her to stop. Sandra had told her to stop. Sandra had told her it was complicated. I kept my face very still. Then Rosalind said the thing that changed the entire shape of the story. She said Philip's ex-wife, the woman he'd separated from the year before, had been pregnant when they separated. The baby had been born 2 months ago. Philip was the father, but Philip had also, according to Sandra, told Sandra that the child might not be his. Sandra had apparently told her mother that Philip had asked Sandra to help, that the baby needed stability, that Philip wasn't in a position to raise a child alone, that Sandra had told Philip she would talk to me. I stared at Rosalind. She wants you to consider, Rosalind said, and I could hear that she didn't want to be delivering this message, taking in the child, as a foster situation, maybe more. I asked her to say that again. She did. My wife, who'd been sleeping with her own brother for at least 8 months, was apparently planning to ask me to open our home to a child who may or may not have been her affair partners, and had sent her mother to begin softening me up. I asked Rosalind, very quietly, if she understood what she was asking me to absorb. She put her hand over her mouth. I think she was ashamed. I think she'd agreed to come because she loved her daughter and hated what her daughter had become. And she thought maybe there was a version of this where I could somehow be made to understand, and she'd arrived at this coffee shop and sat across from me and realized for the first time that there was no such version. I told her not to, Rosalind said. I told her she had no right. I thanked her for telling me the truth. I paid for both coffees. I walked out. That night, I called my attorney again. She's going to ask me to take in her affair partner's child, I said. There was a pause. Benny said, when she does, say nothing. Let her finish, then call me immediately after. 2 nights later, Sandra sat me down after dinner. She started with an apology, a real one, I think. Her voice broke, and she held her hands together in her lap like she was trying to keep herself from shaking. She said she knew she'd hurt me, that she knew it was wrong, that she'd made a terrible mistake. She said she wanted to try to work through it. I listened. I kept my expression neutral. I asked her very gently to tell me everything she wanted to say. She took a breath, and then she said it. She said that Philip was in a difficult situation, that his ex-wife had a baby and wasn't capable of caring for it alone, that she knew this was a lot to ask, but that she thought if we, together as a family, could open our home to the child, Even temporarily, it could be the start of rebuilding. A new chapter. Something to work toward together. I let the silence sit there after she finished. Then I asked her one question. I asked her if she understood that what she was describing, asking me to take in her affair partner's child, her own brother, while I had not yet told her I knew everything, was the single most extraordinary thing any person had ever asked me in my entire life. She blinked. I know it's a lot. I filed for divorce 3 weeks ago, I said. The color left her face. The paperwork is already done. You'll receive it Monday. She said my name. I stood up. I told her that I didn't hate her. I told her that in 17 years I had given her everything I was capable of giving, and that I was sorry it hadn't been enough, and that I genuinely hoped she would figure out what she was actually looking for. I told her that I would not be taking in any child. I told her I'd be staying at a hotel for the next few days to give her time to process, and that everything else would go through our attorneys. She started crying. I picked up the bag I'd already packed. I'd had it in the trunk of my car for a week, and I walked to the front door. She said, "You knew." I paused with my hand on the door. "I knew," I said. "I drove to the hotel. I called Kelsey that night. That was the hardest call I've ever made." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, are you okay?" And I had to take a second before I could answer her. I told her I would be. The divorce finalized 7 months later. Sandra didn't contest the asset division. I think when she understood how much documentation I had and how early I'd started gathering it, she understood that fighting was pointless. Philip's situation with the child resolved itself separately. His ex-wife relocated, and I never heard another word about the foster arrangement Sandra had proposed. Rosalind called me once about a year later. She apologized again, properly this time, said she was ashamed of how things had unfolded, that she'd failed Sandra by not being harder on her earlier. I told her she didn't need to apologize to me. She'd been the only honest person in the room at that coffee shop, and that meant something. I meant it. I'm writing this from a house I bought on my own 18 months after the divorce. Smaller than the last one, but mine in a way the last one stopped feeling like somewhere around Tuesday when I heard that low voice from the kitchen and poured my coffee and chose, for just a little while longer, to pretend I hadn't. Here's what I'll tell you. If you're in the middle of something like this and you're still deciding whether to say something or stay quiet and wait, the waiting isn't weakness. The waiting is information. The more they think you don't know, the more the truth has room to come to the surface on its own. Sandra's attorney never knew about the hotel receipt. My attorney never needed to use it. The case I built in those 3 weeks while Sandra thought everything was normal. That was the case that settled everything quickly and cleanly. You don't have to flip the table. You just have to be the one who's already moved everything valuable off of it before you do. Kelsey flew in for my birthday last spring. We had dinner, just the two of us, at a place downtown I'd never been to. She's 22 now, sharp and kind and building her own life. At the end of the night, she hugged me longer than usual and said, "You held it together really well, you know, when it mattered." I told her I had a good reason to. I've thought about timing a lot since everything fell apart, not in a regretful way, more like studying the mechanics of how something breaks, because nothing in this story happens suddenly. Every piece of it moved slowly, and the only question was whether I was paying attention. Sandra didn't become someone who could do what she did overnight. Neither did Philip. The choices that ended up destroying everything, they were made in small increments, in moments where each of them decided that what they wanted mattered more than what was right. That's how it usually goes. Not a single catastrophic decision, but 100 smaller ones, each one making the next one easier. And the ask, the thing Sandra sat across from me and actually said out loud, that I should open my home to her affair partner's child, her own brother's child, as some kind of path toward rebuilding that didn't come from nowhere either. That came from months of her convincing herself that I was manageable, that I was distracted enough, trusting enough, that she could keep reshaping the situation until it fit what she needed. The ask was only possible because she'd already decided somewhere along the way that my feelings were a variable she could work around. What she didn't account for was that I'd stopped being manageable the morning I heard that careful voice from the kitchen and started paying a different kind of attention. I think about Rosalind sometimes. She came to that coffee shop carrying something she didn't want to carry on behalf of a daughter who'd put her in an impossible position. And she sat down and told me the truth anyway. That took something. It would have been easier for her to stay out of it, to let whatever was going to happen just happen. She didn't. And I think that decision, small as it might seem, was the most decent thing anyone did in this entire situation. Decency doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's just a woman in her 60s sitting across a coffee shop table and choosing honesty over comfort. I don't think Sandra is a bad person in some fundamental way. I think she got lost in something and kept making the choice to go further rather than the choice to stop. That's a human failure. It's also a consequential one. You can understand something and still not excuse it. You can feel sorry for someone and still walk away. What I know now, what this whole experience carved into me, is that the most important thing you can do when the ground starts shifting under you is stay clear-headed. Not cold, not hard, just clear. The moment you let panic or anger drive your decisions, you hand over the only real advantage you have, which is that you see what's happening and they don't know you see it. Kelsey asked me once, about a year after everything settled, whether I was angry. I told her I had been, briefly, and then I'd had to decide what to do with it. Anger is information. It tells you something is wrong. But you can't build anything with it. You can only use it to see clearly for a moment, and then you have to put it down and pick up something more useful. I picked up patience. I picked up documentation. I picked up a phone and called someone I trusted. That was enough.